this is often the question on everyone's lips when we start talking about a new topic on these streams, on these interviews, on the podcast, on the YouTube videos. How do you get started with building a history for your world? How do you find inspiration? Where does it come from? What do you start with?
Basically, usually it's top down or bottom up. So either you start with the thing that you think you're present. I want things to be like this, and I'll go back to rationalize how we came here, because I'm interested in a specific world that is currently like this. Or it can be the other way around. I would love to have a world where there were 12 dragons, each of a different color, and they fought each other, and let's see what happens. And let's see where I'll stop. And where it will be enough. And that will be my present.
Nice.
I highly recommend a game called Microscope for this. It's somewhere between role-playing game and storytelling game. And it's a game, an exercise in world building. You create with your friends eras, and in the eras you create events, and in the events you can create scenes, and it's like a microscope. You can focus in on whatever interests you, and you go bigger and bigger, and you explore more and more, and everyone has ultimate power to do whatever. So if you create a whole continent, someone else can completely destroy it if they want to. And then you can create it again. I mean, you can do whatever you want, and it gives you, it's frightening the amount of power that you feel that you have, and that's very good for inspiration. Also, the game uses some other tricks to make sure that we are inspired, that we create interesting things.
Nice. So what kind of game is this? Is this a computer game? Is it a board game?
No, you play it on a table with some index cards.
Nice. Okay.
I think there's an app as well.
Okay.
But I will highly recommend just the index cards.
Check that out in the break, guys, and try and find you a link, or maybe one of you will find it and post
sure.
it. So I don't have to. That would be awesome.
It's called Microscope RPG by Lame Mage Games, I think.
Very nice. Very nice.
So the specific question was how to get started. I usually start with the present, and then I rationalize back. But I think that the important thing is, and that's probably like the next questions as well, how to rationalize just what you actually need and not everything else. So that can be a problem as well. Sometimes when I want to, there's a nation of tieflings. Why is there a nation of tieflings? Oh, why they were all cursed by something, and that this is taken directly from a world called Zeitgeist. So it's not my invention. So they were all cursed by something that happens. Sure. But you should also add some unexpected stuff, some just cool stuff, because history is not all rationalized. I mean, sometimes just stuff happens. Yeah, and 300 years ago, there was an earthquake and they got separated into two lands. I didn't expect that. It just seems kind of cool. It makes me maybe change some stuff about the present, but sure, because sometimes shit happens in the world, in the actual world, and that should probably happen in your world as well. And for inspiration for that, just read some history. Not boring history. Go to stuff like Crash Course on YouTube. That's awesome. You get 15 minutes of a specific part of history. They have Crash Course History 1, Crash Course History 2. Now they have Crash Course History Europe. So good, because they give you all of the yummy stuff that you want, all of the interesting things that happened, and just steal from that like crazy. Use that. Or start with that, and maybe browse a bit in Wikipedia and see where it leads you. What sort of things can happen to societies when time happens? I can't hear you, Janet.
That's because I muted myself.
I can now hear you, Janet.
I was clonking my tea, and I didn't want everyone to hear me clonking my tea, but now they know that I was clonking my tea anyway, so the illusion is broken. So what I was saying, so silently, was that whether you're starting at the beginning of history and working forward, or the today history and working backward, my advice always for this is play to the edges of your scope and work inward. So start with the big stuff, figure out how that affected other things. So by big stuff, I mean geological events, that's earthquakes, volcanoes exploding, tectonic plates. If you're in a magic world, that might be magical storms and cataclysms and planar invasions. This is all really big stuff. This is important stuff. This is stuff that's going to change everything for everybody. So start with the big stuff. Ditto things like plagues. Plagues are big. Plagues are not always terribly choosy about who they latch onto. Plagues spread, particularly when your sanitation is not excellent. So plagues are another great thing to sort of start with. There's a very good book called Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Yes. That's one of the fundamentals for people who want to understand how to create cool history. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, which I would highly recommend. I have flipped through it. I will be reading it fully, probably over Christmas. But even just sort of dipping into it, I found it incredibly inspiring, incredibly interesting, to see how small things can have big effects, and big things can have effects in ways that you wouldn't imagine.
Yes.
So start with the big stuff, because that's stuff that you know will affect everything. Don't get too excited with the big stuff. Unless you have a world that's massively geologically unstable, don't add too many geological cataclysms, because every single one is going to cause knock-on effects that you haven't imagined. You only need a couple of these things.
And there are enough other things that you can have instead.
Absolutely.
Invasions by Mongols. You can have some invasions by Mongols, really steer things around.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can always, and I'm always saying this, I'm sorry, double back on your genre, double back on your subgenre, double back on your tone, double back on your mood, double back on your conflicts, and you will find inspiration for all of your historical events.
Right.
Because it's all that information, all of that sort of starting seeds, they're all in that sort of core information that you'll have decided at the beginning. Plus, of course, your motivation. So if your motivation is what's going to make an amazing book, then that's great. If your motivation is what's going to be fun for my players, then that's going to tell you as well what kind of history you should be building. And then start considering the knock-on effects. So my favorite example of this is, and I cannot remember the date anymore, but the year that Frankenstein was written by Mary Shelley, there was a massive earthquake. There was no summer. Crops failed.
Right. That's why she stayed in that lake home and wrote it. Yes.
Yeah, crops failed. There was famine. There was sickness. There was plague. There was also a rise in horror for the first time. So, like, Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein for the first time. That's a tiny effect of a massive thing, which sparked a genre, which sparked amazing things. So there's a small thing that happened because of a big thing, which then created an artistic movement.
And that really
brings fascinating.
That really brings us something important. Use personas, use people. Yes. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes there should be a person in the middle of something. Like, for example, someone get murdered and World War I begins. So I'm assuming not everyone really knows a lot about Franz Ferdinand, the whatever, but except that he was an emperor of...
He was Tsar of
Hungary?
Russia, right.
I think, anyway, he got killed and then everything happened. But, for example, and thanks to Crash Course European History, it seems as if the main reason that everyone attacked each other after that happened is because of complicated treaties that just exploded. So it was just like the final straw on something that would have happened if it wasn't that.
Sure.
So maybe the important person here actually is like 30 years back. What's his name? I can't believe I forgot his name. The person that united Germany.
Oh, I know him, of course, from playing Civ.
Yes, exactly, from playing Civ.
Brandenburg? Brunswick? No.
I can't believe I forgot his name.
We'll find his name. We'll find his name. Quick Google here. Keep talking.
But so he created thousands of treaties, and he played the world scene.
Otto von Bismarck.
Exactly, Bismarck. And he played the world scene so things would work best for him. 30 years later, everyone attacks each other because he was no longer there to move things around. There's something that's called the theory of great people of history, I think. That is, there are great people, and they are those that create history. I personally don't think this is indeed the case, but it probably should maybe look a little bit like it when you read a history. There are big names. Here and there are big names. And Mary Shelley might not be a huge name in politics, but she's a big name in literature. She's a huge name. She created a new sort of expression that very much fits the modern interconnected world. And so sprinkle them around, even if you don't know anything about them yet, or maybe ever.
Just drop them in.
Just and a little bit of something about them. An amazing mustache. He had the best mustache. I don't know. I mean, because you need a tiny bit of detail on them. Just the name, I think, is dry. Just invent some quirk that can be attached to give them some life.
Oh yeah, no, I would always agree with that. Whenever you create a name, create something that goes with it, because a name by itself is not quite enough.
No.